Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about some Summer League rookies and just how they're doing so far. Again, this is just the Summer League, so it's not really a, for sure thing they're going to be a bust because if you remember, Victor Wembanyama's first game, it was not good. He even got dunked on. But yeah, let's get started with the first person we're going to talk about, Cooper Flag. Obviously, he did not have a strong game too. Around 10 points. I think he shot 5 for 21 or 5 for 22 from the field. And obviously, that is not a good percentage. But overall, they still won the game by 2 points against the Lakers. But yes, this is the Summer League. This was his first, taste of, that NBA, experience. And again, this kid is only 18 and he's only going to get better. But you can see the flaws that, we talked about before and everyone said like his ball handling needs to be tighter. He needs to be, more dominant in the paint because, he's so physically gifted already at his age. And a game against the San Antonio Spurs when he scored 31 points, I think that's when the organization and the fan base is kind of like, hey, shut him down. We saw what we drafted him for. His defensive ability was there. His offensive ability was there. And overall, that was a really good game. I liked it because he was going to the line more. He was going in the paint more because he realized, wow, I'm bigger than this guy. I'm, 6'8", 6'9", and, 10, 20 pounds more. And I have an advantage. I'm going to take advantage. And it really showed against, his competition. And the next player we're going to talk about is Dylan Harper for the San Antonio Spurs. And I really like Harper. I'm biased because I am a Spurs fan. But overall, he has great size for a point guard. Yes, his biggest flaw is his shooting. In a game against, Cooper Flag, I think he shot, 0 for 4 from three. He did finish with 16 points, 5 for 12 from the field. But yeah, I overall liked this game because he still wasn't afraid to, shoot the three when he was left open, or if he had enough space, he wasn't afraid to pull up for that three or that mid range because, he still confident believes he can, make that shot. And I overall still like that because you want that as, a high, pick because, you don't want to be that, Ben Simmons type of player, no offense, because in the summer league, we saw flashes of, that Ben Simmons, but he was just doing stuff already he was great at and everyone knew the stuff that he wasn't. We didn't really see that until like it was way too late. But yeah, overall, I do like what we saw from, Dylan Harper. I expect him to be shut down soon too, just like Cooper Flag. But yeah, let's move on to the third pick with the Sixers, VJ Edcomb. And I really like VJ Edcomb. I think everyone knew who he was, that Victor Oladipo ceiling. But honestly, he had like a better, start than any, I would say, top five pick in this year's draft class, especially going against, Ace Bailey. He dominated, that performance. In my opinion, maybe he did have, an extra chip on his shoulder because, the whole Ace Bailey situation, he could have went basically third if he just did his workout. But obviously he didn't do it. And it worked out for both parties because BJ Edcomb is that guy and he has that chip on his shoulder. And I overall really like his game. And he's shown that he could be, a natural scorer and he just is not just a, a cut player and put back dunks and a defensive type player. I see a two-way superstar in the making, especially learning from Paul George and Joel Embiid and Tyrese Mack, all these veterans. It's a pretty good situation for him. And one of my favorite players in this year's draft class is Colin Knippel out of Duke, and he did not have a good debut game against the Jazz, only scoring 5 points and 1 for 8, but he did have a good bounce back game, scoring 16 points. And the big thing is everyone saw his IQ of the game. They saw him make the right pass and when to shoot and when to be aggressive. And overall, I really do like Colin Knippel just because his potential is there. I don't really see him as a superstar, but to be, that core piece of a championship team, I really think he can be because he has great size, 6'7", probably around 215, 220. Obviously, he's going to gain more weight and more muscle, but he's going to be shooting, 38% from three to even 40% from three. And those types of players are getting a bag. They're getting, $40 million a year and so much, guaranteed money. And I really like him, especially, his defensive potential. I don't think he's going to be a two-way, star in the making, but I think he's not going to be a defensive liability like a lot of people kind of had questions about. But yeah, overall, I really like Con. And the next guy we're going to talk about, who I'm not really high on just because, his character, characteristics is going to be Ace Bailey. I think his talent is, a top three, top four pick in this year's draft class. In other classes, maybe even last year, he could have been, the number one, but who knows? But overall, his debut game against the Sixers was anything but good. Only scoring 8 points and shooting 3 for 13 from the field and 1 for 5 from three. And he was completely, kind of shadowed by, VJ Ekholm dominating. I think he scored around 28 points, and he was just so much more aggressive. He just looked so much better than, an Ace Bailey. That doesn't mean Ace Bailey is a bust, especially in the summer league. You have to take everything with a grain of salt. I still think his talent is going to be, a top four type in this year's draft class. If we look later down the line, like 3 to 5 years, and I still like Ace Bailey's talent. His, personality and his character is another story, but I still like his, size. I think he can still shoot. But yes, I just see a more Michael Porter Jr. than a Kevin Durant, if that makes sense. And Michael Porter Jr. is a really good player, a max player, an NBA champion. So yeah, I still like, Ace Bailey. He had a bounce back game too against the Grizzlies, scoring 18 points. And yeah, he shot, 7 for 14 from the field and, 3 for 5 from three. And yeah, those are really good numbers. And I expect him to have really bad games, like shooting wise, just because his shot selection's still not going to be the best. And hopefully, Will Hardy's kind of, hey, we're going to bench you because that shot that you did with, 20 seconds left in the shot clock was not a good shot. I don't care, who you are. You're not Kevin Durant right now. And only a Kevin Durant type player could take. But yeah, overall, I still like Ace Bailey. It's just his, personality, his character is going to be, iffy, especially when his rookie deal is going to be, an extension's happen. And my favorite prospect in this year's draft class, Trey Johnson out of Texas. Now, his debut was against the Suns, scoring 18 points, 7 from 13 from the field, 3 from 5 from three. Overall, it was a really good game and kind of what you expect from Trey Johnson. We saw his craftiness when he bounced the ball, when he got caught in the air and he, kind of bounced it off of Kamal Molly Watch. And, everyone was like, oh my God, I didn't expect that because we don't really see it too much. And Giannis even tweeted like, "Oh, that's a Drew Holiday." Is last time I kind of saw that, and that's kind of like that veteran mindset of hey, Trey Johnson. Kind of he gets it from. And overall, I like Trey Johnson. His offensive ability is going to be there, and it's only going to get better. Hopefully, he can learn behind these veteran guards. C.J. McCollum, Marcus Smart. Even Malcolm Brogdon. That's going to be there. These are great minds that have been in this league for a while. Who one defensive player of the year, who've been to the finals, been to, conference finals and multiple times in the playoff. Those are great minds and great veterans to learn from. And overall, I'm excited for the Wizards and Trey Johnson. And a player that Trey Johnson faced a lot, it was Jeremiah Fears out of Oklahoma. And overall, I do like his debut and what we saw, 14 points. He shot 4 from 12 from the field, 1 for 4 from three. He did foul out, which is kind of, I guess he was trying more defensively because he's been hearing, oh, he's too small, his defensive liability, and he wanted to be more of a pest. And I liked it because he knew his weaknesses and he tried to overcome it. Obviously, he's not going to be playing 25 minutes to even 30 minutes unless obviously the Pelicans do have a lot of injuries and DeJounte Murray, but you bring in Jordan Poole, an NBA champion, people forget, and he's still scoring 20 to 25 points a game on good efficiency. And I think that's a perfect player he can learn behind because he kind of knows now the ropes, because when he got to the Wizards he was kind of nonchalant about everything, and they traded him and now it's kind of like an eye-opening experience. But overall, I do like what we saw from Jeremiah Fears. In his second game, he shot 21 times and he only made 5 field goals, 1 for 7 from three, and he had 15 points. And again, he did foul out. And yeah, this was not a good game. They lost to the Lakers, and he kind of got into it with, Bronny James. And it was just kind of a weird, kind of game, because if you just look at, the points and his field goals, it's kind of like, what are you doing out there? But I think he just hearing the scouts and everyone talk about how he's not a defensive pest, and that's kind of like where he's doing it now in the summer league. And yes, I do like it to a certain extent, but overall, I don't see him, that Patrick Beverly type or that Jose Alvarado, because you already have that guy to learn from. You don't need to be that guy. I think he should really just work on like his playmaking and his offense ability, and again his 3-point shot make. Yeah, overall he did have a good summer league. And the next guy we're going to talk about is Igor Demon with the Brooklyn Nets. And overall, a lot of people thought this was a reach because there was so many more talented people available that could help you right away. But they had 5 first round picks. They were gonna reach on somebody, and the potential's there. 6'8", 6'9", point forward. I think he can even play the a point guard or shooting guard if he develops his 3-point shot make. That's a big thing, and that's why a lot of people were kind of iffy about it. But his debut was against the Thunder, only scoring 8 points, 2 of them from the free throw line. But his 2 field goals were threes. He shot 2 for 5 from three, and yes, that's what his weaknesses are. And he took 5 of them, and he only made 2. But that's progress. He's not afraid to say, "Hey, this is what I'm struggling with, and this is why people are doubting me." And I'm willing to work on it. And his second game was against the Washington Wizards, and he scored 12 points, 4 assists and 4 rebounds, and he shot 4 for 13 from three. But those 4 field goals were threes, so he shot 4 for 10 from three. Now I think his point is, hey, I'm gonna work on this three, and I guarantee the coaching staff is saying, hey, man, shoot as many threes as possible. You have the green light. This is the summer league right now. Like, just work on your game. Your weaknesses is three. And overall, I'd like what I'm seeing because his confidence is there. He's saying, hey, I probably missed 6 threes in a row and I'm 0 for 6, but I'm still going to take it. And that's what he's doing. His shooting mechanics is going to get better over time and, working on it. And I just like that he's taking it more and more. Hopefully he's plays the whole summer league and they don't shut him down. But yeah, overall I do like Edgar Demon. Hopefully we can see him more in the regular season too. And the next team we're going to talk about is Toronto Raptors, and their pick was Colin Murray Boyles out of South Carolina. And overall, his debut against the Magic was, decent. It wasn't too crazy. 8 points, 7 rebounds. Didn't make a three, but he shot 2 threes, 3 for 5 from the field, in about, 22, 23 minutes a game. And yeah, he's not there even when the regular season starts. He's not there to score. He's there to defend and switch off on, point guards and shooting guards. And that's what he's for. But he's still going to need to be able to hit the three when he's open because he's going to be left open. Teams are going to read the scouting report and say, hey, double team Scotty Barnes and, RJ Barrett quickly and, leave, Colin Murray Boyles. That's going to hurt them, when crunch time happens. So hopefully he's able to do that because, overall, I do still like him. I thought he would drop a little bit more. I could have saw him, out of the lottery too. But hey, the Raptors saw something. They think he could be maybe a glue guy, like maybe, Alex Caruso type player later down the line. But yeah, overall, this is a good debut. Nothing too crazy. And I think a steal from this year's draft class was, Kamal Mali Watts dropping the 10 to the Suns. And obviously, this was the Kevin Durant trade. But yeah, his debut against, the Washington Wizards, 14 points, 5 rebounds, and he shot, 1 from 6 from three. That means he's willing to take those threes. And, overall, 5 from 13 from the field. And that's nothing too crazy. But he's super raw as a prospect, and this is what you want. You want him to play as much as possible, and I don't see him taking 6 threes when he's playing in the Suns in the regular season at all. But I could see him taking, maybe 3 to 4 max. Max is 4, but overall, he just needs to catch lobs, defend the rim, and be able to, set, good screens for Devin Booker and Bradley Beal if he's on the roster. But yeah, this is a good pick, and I overall really like it, and I'm excited to see him with Devin Booker. Obviously, they have a connection with Olympics, and they kind of had like a talk after, so it's kind of cool to see that. But yeah, this is just the summer league, guys, so take everything with a grain of salt. Whether your player is struggling right now that you really like, or he's killing it. We've seen so many superstars. I would say the biggest superstar I've seen in recent years that struggled in the summer league was Trey Young. He was not good, and now look at him. He's one of the best point guards in the NBA. He's a max player contract. He's a number one option. He's one of the best passers in the game we've seen in recent years, and he struggled in the summer league. And we saw Victor Wembanyama, struggle too, and he admitted, "Hey, I was just running out there. I didn't know really what to do." And then he shut the critics up his second game, and we saw that with Cooper Flag, and we are going to see this with so many players. You don't have to score, 30 points and have a triple double if you're, a top pick. And it's just crazy to me that social media nowadays wants that because they just lost their mind saying, well, everyone says he's the best things in sliced bread and he is only scoring 16 points in the summer league. But you got to remember, most of these guys in the summer league are not going to be NBA players, and he's not going to play with them. But let me know down below, guys, what you think these top 10 players in this year's draft class, how their debut was, or how their summer league's going. I'm going to do more videos about the summer league coming up. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.